Deep in the forests of Pennsylvania, a house does not just sit by a waterfall, it lives on it. This is Fallingwater, Frank Lloyd Wright's 1937 masterpiece of organic architecture. It's been called the most beautiful house in the world. It is also a house that has been on the brink of total structural collapse since the moment it was built. Hi everyone, the old mansion here. Hit that subscribe button and let's find out how this masterpiece was saved from itself.
Our story begins in 1934, in the depths of the Great Depression. Frank Lloyd Wright, then 67, was widely considered a relic. His career was stagnant, his best days seemingly behind him. His client was Edgar J. Kaufman Sr., the wealthy owner of a major department store. Kaufman had a beautiful rustic property outside the city with a small waterfall on a creek called Bear Run. He and his wife, Lillian, loved the site and asked Wright to design a weekend home overlooking the falls. Wright visited the site and then, for months, did nothing. Finally, in a legendary 9-hour burst of creativity, he drew the plans. When Kaufman saw them, he was stunned. Wright hadn't designed a house overlooking the falls. In an act of supreme artistic arrogance and genius, he had designed the house on top of the falls. The waterfall wouldn't be a view, it would be part of the house's foundation, its music, its very soul. The key hook here wasn't technology for comfort, but for drama. The design was a tour de force of cantilevered concrete. These massive horizontal concrete slabs were designed to jut out over the water, seemingly defying gravity, anchored only to the rock on the shore. This was Wright's ultimate expression of organic architecture. The house wouldn't just sit on the land, it would grow from it. The interior was just as radical. The floors were made of waxed flagstone, polished to look perpetually wet, as if the river was flowing right through. The central fireplace was built around an actual boulder that was part of the original site, left in place to physically anchor the living room to the earth. Ceilings were kept intentionally low, forcing your gaze outward through the massive walls of glass back to nature. It was brilliant, it was beautiful, and, according to every engineer who saw the plans, it was impossible.
This transition era wasn't a change of owners. It was the immediate transition from a dream to a terrifying reality. Kaufman, understandably nervous about building his house on thin air, sent Wright's radical plans to a firm of independent engineers for review. Their report was damning. They concluded the cantilevers were structurally unsafe and needed significantly more steel reinforcement than Wright had specified. Kaufman forwarded the report to his architect. Wright, predictably, was enraged. He felt insulted, writing back to Kaufman, "I have put more into this house than you or any other client has ever had. If you do not have faith in the structural integrity of what I recommend, I cannot be responsible." The subtext was clear: trust me or I walk. A terrified Kaufman relented and told Wright to proceed. But the story's first hero is the contractor, Walter Hall. Convinced the engineers were right, and terrified of being responsible for a catastrophic failure, Hall secretly doubled the amount of steel reinforcement in the main cantilever. Wright, who was rarely on site, never found out. But even with that extra steel, the design was too audacious. When the wooden forms, or shoring, were removed, The house did not collapse, but it did sag. The main terrace immediately dropped over 1.75 inches. From its very first day, Fallingwater was failing. Wright, a master showman, dismissed the droop as a minor, expected deflection. But the house was born with a critical flaw, a structural ticking time bomb that would define its entire existence.
The Kaufman family used Fallingwater as their beloved weekend home for over 2 decades. The modern era of the house begins with the son, Edgar Kaufman, Jr. He was an architectural historian and, in fact, was the one who had first introduced his father to Frank Lloyd Wright. When Edgar Sr. passed away in 1955, Kaufman Jr. inherited the masterpiece. He was its greatest champion, but he also inherited its terrifying secret. The sag never stopped. Throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the cantilevers continued to slowly, relentlessly droop. Cracks began to appear. By the 1990s, the main terrace had sagged a horrifying 7 inches from its original position. The house was no longer just deflecting, it was breaking. The modern upgrade for this house wasn't installing new lights. It was a desperate attempt to stop it from falling into the river. Engineers were brought in, and their analysis confirmed everyone's worst fears. The cantilevers were failing. The original design was underbuilt, and the extra steel the contractor had secretly added had only delayed the inevitable. In 1997, large, temporary steel supports were jammed underneath the main terrace. America's most beautiful home was now on life support, a prisoner of its own innovative design, held up by ugly stilts. The race was on to find a permanent solution before it was too late. Our preservation story begins like the Hay House with a gift to the future. In 1963, long before the crisis reached its peak, Edgar Kaufman Jr. entrusted Fallingwater and its surrounding 1,500 acres to the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. This act ensured the house would be shared with the public forever. But it also meant the Conservancy was now responsible for saving it. After the temporary shoring went up, the Conservancy embarked on one of the most delicate and high-tech architectural rescues ever attempted. The solution was brilliant. They couldn't add columns that would destroy Wright's vision. They had to strengthen the house from the inside. In 2002, the restoration team carefully removed the stone floors of the main terrace. They then drilled long holes horizontally through the failing concrete cantilever beams. Through these newly drilled channels, they threaded 13 massive, high-strength steel cables known as post-tension tendons. These cables were anchored to massive concrete blocks at one end. At the other, hydraulic jacks were used to tighten them, like tuning a guitar string. This post-tensioning process created a new upward compressive force inside the concrete, effectively lifting the terrace, neutralizing the sag, and permanently stabilizing the structure. After 65 years of slowly failing, Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpiece was finally, structurally secure.
The 21st century science had finally caught up to and saved a 20th century dream.
To visit Fallingwater today is to experience a perfect paradox. It is the ultimate expression of man and nature in harmony, but also a timeless lesson in the battle between an artist's ego and the laws of gravity. It is a masterpiece that was born flawed, lived on the edge of disaster, and was ultimately saved by the very engineering its creator so famously dismissed. What did you think of this high-stakes architectural gamble? And what other famous buildings with hidden flaws should we explore? Let me know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of The Old Mansion.